You're lucky he even looks at you!
Get out!
The candlelight in the antechamber did what candlelight always does in rooms where something irreversible is about to happen. It made everything visible. Zola stood at the narrow window, the Han River far below the 47th floor, the Gala behind her, its sound coming through the stone archway like something from another register of her life entirely. Her cobalt blue gown caught every candle, her grandmother's ndebele gold cuff, cobalt and crimson and gold against rich, dark skin, held the light. She had told herself she needed air. That was all this was. Then Minji Cho spoke. Minji Cho, in pale silver gray, who had spent almost a decade as the social figure most expected to stand beside Kiro Min and had never once been formally invited to do so, delivered the line aimed at the back of Zola's head, pitched precisely to carry through the open archway. "You're lucky he even looks at you." Zola turned to face her. She had been 11 years old the first time she heard a sentence like that. She had learned to stand very still inside it. Not performance, not patience, something built carefully over a long time with durable materials, because that is what you do when sentences like that find you regularly enough to require a structure against them. The silence she gave Minji was absolute, complete, the most dignified thing in the room. Then from the archway, a voice, low, even, not raised. "Get out." Not to Zola, to Minji. The silence after those two words had no appeal in it and no available answer. The sound of heels on marble, deliberate first, then less so, then absence, then Cairo moving, his knees finding the floor. Zola turned fully. Kiro Min, who controlled the most significant organized crime network in East Asia from this very building, who had been raised from the inside out to believe that wanting something openly was the same as losing it, was on one knee on his own marble floor, black tuxedo, gold compass rose pin at the lapel, a face carrying no calculation whatsoever, not the controlled face, not the managed one, the real one, the one with no architecture remaining in it. 4 words. Don't leave on Friday. 6 weeks earlier, Zola arrived in Seoul with 2 carry-on bags, a venue contract 48 hours from expiring, and absolutely no intention of becoming someone a man would ever descend to one knee for on a marble floor. She was far too practical for that. If you felt what just happened, if you watched a woman stand completely still in something aimed at everything she has quietly carried her whole life, and then heard a voice arrive from behind her attacker, low and absolute, and the sound of knees on marble, you know why this story needed to exist. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who would feel exactly what you just felt, and turn the notification bell on. Every time you do, you carry this story to a woman who has been scrolling past content that never once reached her, and you help this channel keep making stories like this one. She is out there. You know her. Now, let's go back to Seoul. The boardroom on the 45th floor of Min Tower took the southeast corner. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 walls, Seoul's financial district below in daylight. A piece of Korean calligraphy on the interior wall, old and personal, entirely at odds with the controlled architecture around it. The most interesting thing present. Marcus brought her in. "This is Kiro Min," he said. "The man who owns everything you're here to negotiate for." Easy confidence. He was already revising the afternoon. Zola, Director of Hospitality Development for Pan-African Luxury Group, settled her materials at the dark walnut table. Tall and full, broad and curvy, a deep wine-red wrap dress falling generously across wide hips and thick thighs, rich dark skin warm and luminous, her grandmother's ndebele gold cuff on her right wrist. She had been in rooms like this before. She had always left them with exactly what she came for. Then Kiro Min walked in. No announcement. Midnight black, tailored and precise, the gold compass rose pin at his lapel, crossing to the head of the table in 3 movements that used the room without requiring it. He acknowledged Marcus in 1 word. He turned to Zola. Something moved through his expression and was gone before it had time to become anything. He filed it the way he filed everything that required no immediate action. without naming it, without examining it, and moved to the deal. He was very good at moving to the deal. Junho stood at the door in his dark navy suit, earpiece in his left ear, burn scar below the right sleeve. He scanned the room the way he always scanned rooms, efficient, practiced, clinical. When he reached Zola, the scan held for approximately 1 second longer than it needed to. His expression from that point forward was that of a man not paid to have opinions who was currently having approximately 14 deal terms opened, venue exclusivity, partnership duration, revenue split. Zola presented her position without apology. That clause doesn't work for us? Why not? Kiro said. She explained. A pause, the length of which most people would have filled with something softer. She did not fill it. Then low, again. Not because he hadn't heard, because something in her explanation had taken up residence in his attention without permission, and he was not finished with it. He did not examine that. She said it again, unchanged. He granted the revision before the session ended and presented it as if it had always been his intention. It had not been. Both of them were aware of this. Neither commented. Between sessions, she reached for her grandmother's cuff the way a person reaches for something solid when the ground is doing something unexpected. She did not know she was doing it. He noticed the cuff on the third visit and said nothing. He would say nothing for another 9 days. He had simply filed it, the specific way she reached for it, in the part of his mind he reserved for things he was not yet ready to name. They met 3 more times across the following 5 days. Each session ended the same way. The deal advanced exactly as far as it needed to, and something else, unnamed, undirected, advanced a corresponding distance in a direction neither of them had intended. In the second session, Zola challenged Clause 7.3 on grounds of operational equity. 3 sentences, clean and unapologetic. Kiro went quiet long enough that a lesser negotiator might have reached for something softer. She did not reach. She waited. He said, again. She said it a second time, word for word, and the fact that she had not moved a single syllable of it did something to the room. He granted the revision. He presented it as if he had arrived there himself. The silence between that presentation and her acceptance lasted 4 seconds. The deal did not require 4 seconds. Neither of them moved. Abena took Zola's arm before the elevator. Abena, who had been head of communications for Pan-African Luxury Group and the closest friend Zola had trusted with the unedited version of herself for nearly 2 decades. That revision wasn't strategy, Abena said. Your left hand was on that cuff for 45 seconds while he was deciding, I counted. Zola said. The revision was favorable. Abena looked at her for a long and very patient moment. Yes, she said, in the voice of a woman who has been right about something and intends not to rush it. It was. Zola did not answer. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened and she walked in. Abena followed. The silence in the elevator had a shape neither of them addressed. Between sessions, Minji arrived, a lunch arrangement. The reason was plausible. That was not the point. She came in a charcoal-sheath dress, her bob immaculate, one hand turning the stem of a water glass with the deliberate slowness of someone calibrating every element of a room. She greeted Kiro with a smile that arrived precisely at warm and knew exactly where its own limit was. She turned to Zola. I've heard such good things. Another rotation of the glass. Her eyes were doing the actual conversation. It's been a productive week, Zola said. Precise diction. Shorter sentences than usual, a smile entirely present and offering nothing whatsoever. People who knew Zola well understood this was considerably more dangerous than visible anger. Minji did not know Zola well. This was her primary strategic disadvantage. Minji's hand continued on the stem of the glass. Slowly. One more rotation. Her gaze traveled once across the room and returned to Zola with something specific in it. The specific thing a woman carries when she believes she is owed a room and has just been reminded she is not the most interesting person inside it. She left without resolving the conversation. That was intentional. Zola knew it was intentional. The glass had been set down at a particular angle. Neither of them commented. Both of them had counted. Junho, at the doorway, had the expression of a man not paid to have opinions who was currently having approximately 14 and choosing to act on none. That afternoon, Junho and Abena occupied the same corridor outside the boardroom for 4 minutes on ostensibly separate errands, entirely logistical, entirely about something else. Abena straightened a framed piece of calligraphy on the wall without being asked, because she could not switch off an act of care. Junho watched her hands do it. He said nothing for a beat longer than the moment required. The beat passed. They both moved on. The calligraphy remained straightened. The archive corridor on the 46th floor was exactly wide enough for 2 people to pass without touching, if both chose to. They had not, apparently, both chosen to. Zola was reviewing supplementary materials when Kiro came for a bound proposal on the shelf behind her shoulder. Neither had known the other would be present. He did not step back. She did not rush. She reached past him to the shelf. The retrieval took considerably longer than it needed to. The silence ran past professional into something with its own weight and its own temperature. She was aware of the specific distance between them. She was aware she was not decreasing it. She was also aware she was not increasing it, and that this awareness was itself a position she had taken, deliberately, without announcement. He heard her breathe. He heard his own heartbeat for the first time in years and had absolutely no protocol for it, because 20 years of running an enterprise that required the management of everything had not produced a framework for standing in a corridor and having no framework. His left hand, nearest the wall, went entirely still. Not moved. Still. A body holding itself in place against something it had not been asked to resist. His first visible crack in 11 days. She pulled the proposal free. She did not step back immediately, 1 additional second, unaccounted for, entirely voluntary on both sides, before they both retreated to professional language at precisely the same moment. Somehow worse than if one of them had simply spoken first. She walked back down the corridor without looking back, not because she didn't want to, because she knew she would, and she had decided she wasn't ready to know what she would see. Junho was in the hallway, watching through the glass inset in the archive door. He had spent 20 years being excellent at his job. He was not currently certain what his job was. He would not speak of this. She returned to her hotel. She made Rooibos tea, sat with it until it was cold, turned her phone face down on the table, and did not answer Marcus's message until the following morning. 3 days passed. A dinner Marcus had arranged ended at the Han River waterfront, string lights across the bridges above, the city enormous and quiet at the waterline. He said a Zulu proverb in answer to a decision she had been stalling on, and she laughed, fully and unguarded, in her own language in a foreign city. The sound of it was something that belonged to her without qualification. At the waterfront periphery, near the parked vehicles, Junho had his jacket half off his shoulders when Abena passed. He extended it against the cool of the evening. She declined. He kept it extended for 1 additional second before withdrawing it. Neither commented. Both remained slightly more careful than the situation required for the rest of the evening. Kiro's car passed the riverfront on its way to a separate venue across the city. He had sent a revised clause addendum to her hotel during the dinner. In the language of men who do not know how to write love letters, this is precisely what a love letter looks like. Through the window for 4 seconds he saw them. Marcus speaking close to her ear, Zola laughing, the laugh that had nothing managed in it. His hand found the window button. He did not raise it. He sat with the image and the clause addendum already sent, the letter already written, already delivered, before he had seen this, and he did not examine what either of those things meant, because the only available conclusion was one he was not ready to reach. The following morning he returned to the boardroom with the composure of a man who had slept entirely fine. Junho's single eyebrow said, "I have nothing to add." This was the funniest thing that had happened to Junho in approximately 3 years. 4 days later, she came to his penthouse for the final contract stage. She brought the Rooibos tin from Johannesburg, and without explanation, set 2 cups on his pale oak coffee table. He looked at them. He drank his without asking what it was. She watched him do it, and the watching was not incidental. She was making a decision about the kind of man who would drink something entirely unfamiliar simply because she had placed it in front of him. The decision had a specific conclusion. They worked. The city was below them, Seoul in full night, all that light running in every direction. At a natural pause in the documentation, he said, "That." Not the cuff. The expression on her face when she touched it. She had the abbreviated answer prepared. She got 3 words in. She stopped. What she gave him instead was the full truth. Her grandmother's name, the cobalt in the beadwork for the sky above the garden before sunrise, the crimson for the winter courtyard fire, the warmth of it, the circle of it, the gold because morning does not apologize for arriving, the Ubuntu philosophy not as a declaration but as the actual structure by which she moved through the world. A person is a person through other people, that she had never required a room's permission to be fully herself inside it. He listened the way people listen when they are genuinely present, not preparing the next thing to say, only receiving what is being said. When she finished, the silence between them was not empty. He looked down at his chest, at the architectural gate tattoo above the open collar of his shirt, the half-finished linework of something enormous. "It's unfinished," he said, a pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. "I know," she said. She did not ask why. In a room full of things that could have been said, not asking was the most intimate possible choice, and they both understood exactly what it was. His hand moved to the lapel pin on the chair back and straightened it with 2 fingers, precise, controlled. The first time he had done this in front of a woman in 20 years of having women in rooms. Armor reassembled. She saw him do it and understood it for exactly what it was. She left the penthouse at 11:47. The Rooibos tin remained on his table. He sat with the empty cup for a long time. He did not refill it. He looked at the tin, her choice, her presence, reduced now to an object on his coffee table, and understood, clearly and inconveniently, that he was not going to stop thinking about this. He filed that under things he was not ready to act on. It was the first time that File had felt dishonest. The following evening she came for the final signed contract stage. That was the pretext. Both of them knew it. The documents between them on the coffee table, and then, by degrees, the way temperature changes in a room, not between them in the way they had been. He moved first, not toward her, toward the cuff she had been unconsciously turning on her wrist. A small, slow revolution, again and again. She hadn't known she was doing it. His hand closed the distance slowly, slowly enough that there was no ambiguity, slowly enough that she could have stepped back, and she did not step back, and they both registered that she did not step back. He was about to say something. The audience could feel it arriving, the particular weight of something true with no exit left in it, no strategy remaining, just the thing itself, finally out in the open where it had no protection. Junho's voice came through the earpiece. Arrival call. His presence required in 5 minutes. Junho entered and the room changed. Kiro's hand withdrew. Zola stepped back. "Good timing," she said. Professional, composed, entirely professional. What those 2 words cost her, only the audience heard. He had been raised inside the conviction, structural, lifelong, foundational, that wanting something openly was the same as surrendering it. Every wall he had ever built was fluent in that belief. Standing in his own penthouse with his hand withdrawn and her face carefully composed, he could feel both things simultaneously, the wanting and the withholding, and act on neither. That was the cost. That was what it looked like when a man has trained himself too well. Junho's expression in the doorway was the expression of a man who would take back the last 30 seconds if the laws governing time permitted. His professional record was otherwise spotless. He would not speak of this. The list of things Junho would not speak of was becoming significant. The morning of her final working day, Abena arrived at the hotel suite and sat on the edge of the bed. Not across from her, on the bed. The difference was not accidental. "Say it," she said. "The contract is signed," Zola said. "We got everything we asked for." Zola. Long silence. What Zola said next, she addressed to the window, because the window was the only place she could say it at the volume it required. She named it. All of it. His world and what it cost to be inside it. The clause he had sent to her hotel at 9 in the evening when the deal was already closed. His hand moving across the distance without anything to call it except what it was. The fact that she had not moved away from it, and what that meant about her. And what she was going to do about all of it on Friday morning. Abena listened to the whole thing without a single interruption, which was the most respectful thing she had done in their 20-year friendship. Then, "You have never in your life decided you cannot have something and been right about it." At the door, almost incidentally, he revised a clause at 9 in the evening. The deal was done. Both of you knew it. He revised it because he wanted you to have the better version. A beat. "I'm a communications professional. I communicate. That's all I'm doing." She left. Zola stood at the window for a long time. The city was enormous and indifferent and entirely unhelpful. She turned from it. She did not pack her bag. In Abena's pocket, a brief message from Junho about gala arrangements. She answered in 2 words. She did not mention this to Zola. She dressed for the gala the way she dressed for every difficult thing in her life, with intention, with her grandmother's cuff on her right wrist, with the quiet conviction that she was more than adequate for whatever was going to happen. She had always been more than adequate. That had never been what she was afraid of. The cobalt gown moved differently than wine red, heavy silk charmeuse carrying the light over the full sweep of her body, wide hips and generous frame, the unhurried authority of a woman who takes up the space she occupies without apology or commentary. The Nidabelli gold cuff and the drop earrings and her 4 sea coils pinned high with gold fabric caught everything the suspended candle fixtures had to offer across the dark marble floor of the 47th floor. Across the room, Kuro Min's glass went still. His conversation partner finished a sentence Kuro had entirely stopped processing. Kuro said, "Excuse me." Marcus arrived at Zola's shoulder. Easy, warm, protective. Kuro observed. Then Junho appeared at his left. "She leaves Friday morning." Kiro's jaw did not visibly tighten. His glass had already been still. A figure from a rival family approached Zola with the smooth introduction of a man who had decided she was worth knowing. Kiro crossed 11 meters of marble in 11 seconds. He arrived at her shoulder. No raised voice, no touch, no announcement, just arriving and being precisely who he was, in precisely the way that made the geometry of the situation clear without requiring explanation. The rival understood the geometry entirely and withdrew with every appearance of having intended to move on regardless. "I wanted to check on the venue details," Kiro said. The worst lie told in a room full of professional liars. Something moved at the corner of Zola's mouth. Just there, just once. The thing Abena would have recognized from across a room. She let it settle before she answered. "I hear you," she said. The space between that sentence and what it actually meant was the entire room. They both stood inside it for one breath, present, deliberate, neither of them pretending anymore, before the gala reasserted itself around them, and they were once again 2 professionals at an event. Both of them knew exactly what had been checked. Minji had been watching all of it from across the room. She set her wine glass down, all the way down. For the first time all evening, the glass placed flat, finally still. She walked toward the antechamber archway. She knew exactly who would follow. Zola followed. She needed air. That was all this was. The antechamber was candlelit and quiet. The Han River far below the long narrow window. The gala sound carrying through the stone archway like something from another register of her life. Minji was already there, silver and precise, the wine glass gone from her hand. Zola noticed its absence, that hand, finally empty, the way you notice when something that has been present all evening is suddenly not. "You know how these evenings go," Minji said. Her smile was exactly what it always was. Everyone finds their place eventually. Then, as Zola turned away, aimed at the back of her head, pitched precisely to carry through the open archway. "You're lucky he even looks at you." Zola turned back. She had been 11 years old the first time. She had learned to stand very still inside it. Not performance, not patience, something built carefully, over a long time, with durable materials. The silence she gave Minji was absolute, complete, the most dignified thing in the room. Then from the archway, a voice the room went quiet for. Low, even, not raised. "Get out!" Not to Zola, to Minji. The silence after those two words held no appeal and no available answer. The sound of heels on marble, deliberate first, then less so, then absence. Junho stood in the archway. He did not intervene. He had been waiting for this, without knowing he had been waiting, for several months. Then Cairo moved. His knees found the marble floor. No calculation in his face. Not the controlled face. Not the managed one. The real one. The face his men had never seen. The face he had not worn in 20 years of believing that showing it was the same as losing everything it looked at. "Don't leave on Friday." She looked at him. At a man on one knee on his own marble floor in front of everything he had ever built, having arrived, without strategy, without architecture, without anything left to manage himself with. At the most honest thing he had ever said. She did not speak. She reached down, not to take his hand, not to pull him up. She placed 2 fingers on the half-finished gate tattoo at his chest, through the open collar of his shirt, on the unfinished line work of something enormous that had been waiting for a very long time for something to pass through it. She held them there. 2 fingers. Still. "I know what this is. I know why you left it unfinished. I know you. I know exactly what this means." He closed his eyes for 1 second. That was the answer. That was the whole story. He rose. She kept her hand on his chest for 1 breath more, 1 full breath, entirely voluntary, entirely deliberate, and then she moved it slowly to her side. He said, "Friday." She said, "I hear you." He now knew exactly what that meant. Through the archway, Abena's face held 20 years of watching a woman finally be reached the way she deserved to be reached. She was going to need 9 days and at least 4 phone calls to fully process this. She had already begun composing the first one. If you stayed for all of it, if you watched a woman who has been told in every possible register that she should be grateful to be seen stand completely still when someone finally said it out loud, and then watched a man understand on a marble floor in front of his entire world that she was the lucky one, then you know this story belongs to more women than just us. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to feel exactly what you just felt. Leave a comment about the moment that found you because your words carry this story further than this room can hold. Turn the notification bell on so the next story reaches you when it arrives. Every comment, every share, every subscription is a hand that passes this to a woman somewhere who has been scrolling through an entire evening of content that looks directly at her and never once moves her. She deserves to be moved. She is out there right now. Thank you. Genuinely, from the heart. Now let's finish. Junho and Abena met in the corridor near the private elevator lobby, the way 2 people meet when they have been circling a moment for most of an evening. She was passing him. His collar was fractionally crooked, the single imperfect detail in an entirely composed man. She reached up and straightened it, because an act of care she could not switch off was simply that. He looked at her. Not operationally, not scanning for anything. He said her name. She said, yes. The narrator stepped past the rest without comment. The audience understood completely. And then Zola, at the penthouse window. Seoul below, the Han River in the dark. She had not gone back to her hotel. She was not leaving on Friday. She touched the Ndebele gold cuff, not from stress, not from habit, but because it was there, and her grandmother was there, and she was here, in this city, at this window, which was not the life she had arrived in Seoul intending. In her experience, that was the most interesting possible sign. She did not know yet what this city would ask of her. She did not know what his world would require, the weight of it, the complication of it, the specific cost of staying inside something dangerous because the thing at the center of it had turned out to be real. But Ubuntu does not need to be imported. It lives in her, and she had just watched it arrive in him without a map or a strategy, on his knees on a marble floor. Her grandmother used to say, "The things worth keeping are the ones you did not plan for." Zola had not planned for this. She was keeping it anyway.